Okay, this is probably Friday at the end of week 3. In your syllabus, you'll probably notice that the topic is leadership and management. The most direct relationship between these ideas is the L in leadership. When you think of management, I try to emphasize, like I do with the other acronyms, if you think about marketing, it should be the 4 Ps. First thing comes into your head. A question about marketing strategy, if you have the 4 Ps, then you'll write about 4 Ps. Especially if the question is an 8-mark question and you see the 4 Ps, you're like, oh, it must be 2 marks for each one of the Ps. If I ask you a question about the external environment, I would expect you to first think about PEST. And if you see a question on the test that says PEST, or an external environment question, you think, oh, okay, wait, political, economic, social, and technological elements of the environment. So this is there as kind of a trigger to you, to get you to think about the topic and be able to not forget important elements of that as you're writing answers about it on test. Another one that I'm trying to push more and more, I'm trying to make an acronym. It doesn't really have a great sound yet, and there's not a really easy way to do it, but I call it XECS, and the X group represents the stakeholders in the operational environment, which means employees, EC, consumers, and S, suppliers. So if you think about the operational environment, X, EC, S, that should help you to know what to talk about. In terms of management, the acronym that I like, or that is commonly used, is POLC, or POLC. POLC stands for planning. We looked at this when we were looking at the different levels of management, right? Planning, organizing, then L, which is leadership, and then C, which is controlling. So controlling means the same as monitoring or checking. So leading is basically part of managing, right? That's what's happening there. So, and we talked about when we did the levels of management, there's a different kind of leadership at the top of the organization, this vision, kind of macro, broad view of the company and where it's going to go in the future. And then we have the leadership that is, day-to-day operation level, right? I think you can compare those to the football manager who stands on the sideline and goes like this. I made all these tactical visions. I had a vision of how we would win the game. And then you have the captain of the team. The captain of the team is actually one of the players. And they're out there communicating and trying to get the most out of a situational environment. So that's one way of looking at different kinds of leadership. 2 videos ago, I suggested that middle management actually needs to have more of a leadership role now too, because middle management tends to be the O in POLC, which is the organizer of resources. And because a lot of the leading companies now, and the vision of the company is to be able to have not only ethical suppliers in terms of workers' rights, but also environmentally friendly suppliers. So the middle managers have to take a leadership role in not only selecting and finding the suppliers who are ethical, but also convincing the shareholders and convincing everyone else in the organization that this is a benefit for the organization in the future, and that even though maybe it costs a little bit more, it's still a benefit for the company. So we're in chapter 16 in the book. That's page 177. And they have, of course, the typical silly quotation here. A true leader. It's almost like a poem. A true leader does not point fingers. A true leader does not assign blame. A true leader does not celebrate the mistakes of others. Why would they? A true leader points you in the right direction. A true leader assigns praise, however small or meager the task. A true leader celebrates the accomplishments of a team. The true leader leads. Wow. I guess the true manager manages. So that's all pretty funny there. I don't know where he got that quote from. Typically though, we do find that most comparisons between leaders and managers put the leaders, up on the high pedestal. The leaders and the managers are kind of bureaucratic, they're not very exciting. The managers just do the job, and the leaders are the ones who are who really see what's going on and what's out there and make the big decisions. So it's kind of funny that you hear all these things. There's 1,000 videos on the internet that talk about how leadership is better than management. But I'll have one video here, a very short video, it's only 3 minutes, and discuss the role of a manager. Think of, not everybody uses POLC, but you can think of it yourself, right? Planning, organizing. The organizing means organizing resources, human resources, financial resources, material resources, equipment, factories, warehouses, all the resources of the company. L, there we go, leadership, and C, which means to check the KPIs, to check that the business is meeting its goals and expectations. All right, Jim.
Hi there. Let's take a quick look at what managers do as we explore the role of a manager. Don't forget, in business, you may have quite a complex organisational hierarchy with different layers, and this is where you'll find different levels of management. From right at the top, the board of directors, who are very much the senior management, working our way down to perhaps encountering layers of middle management, and right at the bottom, some junior managers. But managers effectively do the same thing. What they do, of course, is dependent on their level of seniority. So let's quickly look at the 5 main roles of managers. What do? Well, firstly, they set the objectives of the business, the targets that need to be achieved.
Planning.
Secondly, they analyse performance using certainly financial data, potentially also non-financial data.
Controlling.
And of course, performance should be measured against, to some extent, the objectives of the business. Thirdly, managers review performance. Having analysed the data, having analysed performance, it's then a review to see what are the important lessons learned. For example, budget.
Maybe I should rephrase that. Analyzing is controlling, and then planning the next cycle. Review is controlling.
Budgeting will be an example of financial review performance. A fourth and very important role of managers is to make decisions. And lastly, of course, as they do the first 4, along the way, hopefully they will also inspire and lead others. So to give you an example of these roles in action, imagine a sales director of a large business. That sales director, well, she may set sales targets by product or perhaps by geographical region, by territory. To analyse performance, she may look at the sales data for this year and compare it with the same period last year, but also, of course, very importantly, against the budgeted sales. The sales director, when she comes to review performance, will not just be looking at financial data, but she may be looking at the performance of individuals in her sales team. So she may conduct appraisals as part of the performance reviews. The sales director is also going to have the authority to make decisions. In this case, a sales director is likely to be looking at decisions about how she spends the promotional budget or which distribution channels she decides to use.
And that's O, right? That's organizing and allocating resources.
And lastly, the sales director is also hopefully going to motivate and encourage her sales team, particularly important in sales, where it's all about confidence and performance. So there we go, those are the 5 main roles of managers. And that's just a summary of the role of a manager.
And then you get into, that leadership, that idea of what makes someone a leader as opposed to a manager. Leadership usually comes with a certain kind of, there's a certain power involved with it. So we'll talk about that, of course, a little bit too, the different kinds of power that people have. So let's go to the book and look at how they define the comparison between leadership and management. First, it says here, the business owner or CEO needs to be a leader of their business organization. In this role, they're meant to motivate or inspire their employees to be able to achieve the mission and goals of the business. Sometimes these CEOs, they create a mythology around themselves. Steve Jobs. They're visionaries. I mean, they just had an advantage in the market and took advantage of it like most people would. Some of them, like Mark Zuckerberg, they said that he just basically stole the idea from someone else. So it doesn't. CEOs aren't necessarily geniuses. It's true, they might have a vision of how they can make money, although some of them are just lucky. Management is primarily seen, on the other hand, as more of the O, the organizational role of the business, and involves coordination of employees and resources. Arguably, though, a manager can take on a leadership focus as part of their role. The business owner of a small business definitely needs to take on both roles, or all 4 roles, which is POLC. They make a small comparison of this weird thing. I can read some of it. My book is pretty light in some places. It says leadership, strategy. Strategy is, again, the manager of the football team. We want to play offensive-minded, defensively, counterattack. And then the tactical elements are the ones that are actually chosen by the players in their movements on the field. Set goals and then find ways to reach the goals. Inspire employees versus coordination of employees and resources. Leadership, choosing the right teams and talent for the job. Management, directing the human resources to the right places. Leadership, empowering change. That sounds so incredible, empowering change. Whereas management is there to maybe tell you what you can and cannot do, and to maybe manage some of the risk levels and the costs of these fantastic dreams that the CEO might have about a flying telephone or a drone phone. That's my new name for it, the drone phone. You can just leave your phone anywhere and it'll fly back to you. People will steal it and you can just have it fly back to you like a bird or a dog. It can find its way home. Middle manager, can you make that happen? I don't know, Mr. Steve Jobs. I think it'll be expensive to make a drone phone. Make it happen. Okay, Mr. Jobs, said the middle manager. So, yeah, they may come back and suggest that it's not something that can be done or affordable. But before we get any further, let's at least look at 178 and again compare or at least make notes about POLC. Plan, develop objectives. Okay, we have objectives and goals. We have some idea in the planning about how to achieve the goals, or at least who is going to be responsible for trying to achieve the goals. It doesn't say O, it says PCCL, but coordinate means the same thing as organize in this case. And this has to do with resourcing, delegation of tasks, distribute tasks, delegate, manage the flow of information, set up the systems that need to feedback for the company to know whether things are going to work or not, and also to deal with the actual financing of the elements that are leading to of the project, right? So all of those things. We know about, in movies, you always see a director and a producer, right, at the end of the movie. Who's more important? Well, the director has the vision of what the film's going to look like, and the producer is the one who gets the money to finance the film and organizes paying the actors and makes the contracts for everything. So, it's again similar. The director is the leader, visionary, and the producer is basically handling the business and the management of the system. So then you get to controlling. I don't know why they put control before leading, so I'll put leading first. Leading entails having a vision of the future, but also to direct and keep people in the game on game day, as well as to motivate. So vision, motivation, and goal setting. Those are really the main things. And then control. Control is, it says performance. Anytime you see performance, you have another letter you can think about, or acronym. KPIs. That's not an acronym, is it? KPI is key performance indicators, which means the actual SMART of goals of the company. So actual measurement of goals. And the control there is to go back and to check that you have reached your goals. Alright, let's send everyone home. Great weekend. Alright, so I wanted to play one more video, which I think is kind of good. It's this guy named, we'll talk about him next year, John Cotter. But I think he makes a nice kind of comparison within real life organizations about the difference between leading and managing. I think it's pretty good. I like it. So I'm going to play it.
Okay, here's the tip, and then I'm going to back up and tell you why I think it's important. The tip: be absolutely crystal clear in your own mind about the difference between leadership and management, and make sure the people around you are also crystal clear about that difference. Now, let me back up. Management is fundamentally a set of processes, the most core of which are planning, budgeting, organizing, staffing, controlling, and problem solving. And what management does is to take a system, an organization of people and technology, and make it function the way it was designed to function, producing a good or a service on time, on budget, absolutely the way it was designed to work. What leadership is it's a set of processes involving creating a vision of the future and a strategy for getting there, for communicating that out to people in a way that gets them to buy into it, and then creating an environment that motivates those people, that inspires those people to want to make that vision a reality. And what leadership does is it creates, in a sense, the systems that managers manage, or it takes them and it changes them in some fundamental ways to adapt to changes outside an organization, to grab opportunities, to duck hazards, to raise standards. Both are obviously very important, but if you don't get it clear what each is, you run into these problems. Here's the most typical. All of a sudden, something happens in a company's environment. Basically, the most common is the speed of change goes up. And somebody notices this, and it starts affecting, for example, their financials. And they come back and they say, we've got to do something about this, and one aspect is clearly we need more and better leadership at the top, or at the top and right below the top. And those people really try hard to beat away at that. But they think that management is leadership. So what they work at is the planning stuff, the budgeting stuff, the organizing stuff. And at a certain point, you can literally become overmanaged and underled. And it's almost impossible, unless you've got a monopoly, to be overmanaged and underled and do well in the kind of world that we're living in today. I see it in performance appraisal forms. People are trying, the leadership word is coming up more. There it is in the performance appraisal. And I look at the items underneath it, half of them are management items. So because of the lack of clarity, as they try to cram that into the system, into succession planning, into recruiting, what they're in reality doing is promoting more people who are good at management, bringing in more talent that has management potential, not leadership potential. And they're not solving the real leadership problem that can help them deal with this increasingly turbulent, changing environment. You got to understand the differences and the people around.
We got to go through this last part again. It's a little bit crazy. So far, he's talking about over-management. So you have too many people who are basically just pushing around numbers and resources, but they don't really know, they don't really have a drive towards any goal, right? I mean, the goal is to get the work done for that day, but it's not like, okay, what do we want this organization to do?
overmanaged and underled. And it's almost impossible, unless you've got a monopoly, to be overmanaged and underled and do well in the kind of world that we're living in today. I see it in performance appraisal forms. People are trying, the leadership word is coming up more. There it is in the performance appraisal. And I look at the items underneath it, half of them are management items. So because of the lack of clarity, as they try to cram that into the system, into succession planning, into...
So what he was saying was, and we looked at this before, performance management, is that even the staff, you know, when they talk about, you know, the question is on a performance, you know, how do you feel about the leadership or the direction of the company? And they say things that are about, you know, there's not enough resources for my department, and we really can use more staff. And those things are about management. So even the staff is not really thinking about what the leadership or the direction or the mission of the company is. They're even in the performance appraisals and the performance management, they're thinking about smaller issues. Secession is about recruiting. It's about finding someone to replace someone. So if you have, this is something that I didn't talk about before, but it's very critical in terms of staff needs. If you, let's take an example of a sushi restaurant. A sushi restaurant has a main chef. How easy is it to find a main chef for a sushi restaurant? I don't think it's really clear where's the first place you should look for that person who can do that job. But you should probably have at least 2 people who can do that job on your staff, because if one goes away, then you don't really have an easy replacement. So succession can mean like a king, you know, who's going to be the next leader, or it can mean like, you know, how many people can fill in for the job if the person who is normally doing the job can't do it or something happens to them. Do you have a replacement for each position in the company? So in this case, when you're hiring people, you need to think about whether you're hiring leaders or managers for these positions.
Recruited. What they're in reality doing is promoting more people who are good at management, bringing in more talent that has management potential, not leadership potential. And they're not solving the real leadership problem that can help them deal with this increasingly turbulent, changing environment. You gotta understand the differences, and the people around you need to understand them. And if you don't, you get yourself into trouble.
Okay, that's what it says there. It says okay, and then he says okay, and then the thing says okay, and it's all kind of creepy. I don't like the way the book is laid out here. I don't really think it's well done. When I think about, I mean, these leadership styles, right? I don't want to start with page 178. 178 is, it says something called transactional style. It's not a style. I don't think, I would not call it a style. I wouldn't say if someone was entering into a company and I said, okay, what is your leadership style? And they would say transactional. Transaction means to exchange something. In this case, it's more like psychology, right? It's like behavioral psychology. So this would be kind of carrots. Okay, here, you want some carrots? Follow this way. And if you don't do what we want, sticks. Carrots and sticks. It's behaviorism. It's management by punishment and reward. And as we saw from motivation theory, that actually doesn't always work out, right? To have punishment and reward as it depends, really, on what kind of staff you have. So, then it talks about Carl Lewin and his leadership styles, and then it shows 3 bubbles, and then it goes on to talk about 4 different kinds of leadership style. And I think that's the one I really want to talk about, the 4 different kinds of leadership styles there. I'll come back and talk about some of the concepts about power later in the next class. But I want to go over the 4. As far as I'm concerned, there's 4 main types. I agree with this side the best, 4 types of power. It's on page 1, not power, leadership, 179. So the first one, we call it authoritarian or autocratic. This is the kind of classic hard Hitler style, my way or the highway kind of leadership style. Now, depending on where you are and what kind of staff you have and what kind of cultural elements are involved, it sounds bad, but some staff expect it. They expect their leaders or their managers to be like, okay, this is what you do. They're happy to be directed. Some workers are very happy to be directed. This type of leader likes to make all the decisions by themselves without consulting others in the business. Their aim is strictly to benefit the business, not the employees. This was similar to what Frederick Taylor thought. They dominate all decisions. They set the goals of the business, and their communication style is downwards. There's no two-way communication, it's just downwards. I tell you what to do, you do it. It's like an army. It's similar to an army. No feedback occurs back to the leader. This type of leader believes in direct supervision of employees. They will create a somewhat distant type of professional relationship with their staff. Their staff will not feel close to them. They're kind of, it's separated. It's a separate world. Autocratic leadership has advantages, though, when decisions need to be made quickly. So if there's a situation that you don't need to have feedback and you can just decide, this is why military commanders are given autocratic leadership. So if decisions need to be made quickly and tasks performed in stressful situations, for example, doctors, in an emergency medical situation, or soldiers in a military combat situation. And you can imagine that this is truly, this is the main, organizational and leadership style for a hierarchical structure, right? Tall hierarchical structures tend to have top-down, autocratic, authoritarian leadership. There are moments when that is actually useful, which we'll talk about in detail. But imagine, for example, like what they said, there's an emergency, some kind of emergency. Do you have time to sit down and discuss the options about that? So that kind of leadership is associated with Taylor. Frederick Taylor was a proponent of the autocratic leadership style, which also says that it's over 100 years old. The leadership theory grew out of the practice of scientific management and developed in the early 20th century as part of the Industrial Revolution. It was a result of attempts to improve the production process by training employees as specialized units of the production process. So, what can we say about that? Autocratic works well when you have unskilled workers or workers that have very specific, simple tasks, where the manager doesn't need to, well, put it this way, the worker doesn't know more about the task than the manager. So whenever you're in a situation where the manager knows and they could do the task just as well as the worker, except that they're higher and they don't want to do that, you can use an autocratic style. Imagine some doctor, though, and the manager of a hospital who comes in and says, "Hey, what are you doing there, doc? I think you should cut the patient this way and not that way." The doctor is just going to look at that manager and say, "Look, I know more about you, about this. I know more about this than you do. So get out, go." So in that situation, you couldn't use an autocratic style because the staff knows more about how to do the job than the manager. So that's another one, or at least another situation. Okay, then you get to what is called a compromising. The compromising leader. This type of leader likes to make their own decision. However, they understand that there's some information and that there's some resources that they need to, learn from within the organization. So they often try to make decisions that will support the employees as much as the business, or at least somewhat. They communicate with employees. They try to clarify the motivation of the company and why decisions are being made, and try to ensure that they're concerned that they're going to lose staff. Now, if you're autocratic like Taylor, you don't really worry about staff turnover so much. You assume that the ones that do the best get the highest salary, they stay. And those who don't do so well, they fail, and you let them go. The compromising leader is more modern and understands that employees actually need to be a little bit inside the loop in order to feel connected to the company, and they need some connection. However, this kind of compromising leader only compromises to the point that they still make the final decisions. So, this leader still has a certain expertise over the staff in terms of knowledge about the business and how it works. Then you get to what is called the democratic leader, or perhaps participative leader. So this kind of leadership is quite, I'd say it's kind of you don't do it in a pure way. You rarely have a business that's truly democratic in their decision making and in their communication. But you have companies that are more democratic than others. And usually that occurs at the management level, not so much at the lower end. So what? This type of leader, the democratic leader, is not one-way top-down, but actually takes feedback, and there's two directions of communication. This type of leader involves employees actually in the decision-making and aims to benefit both the business and staff as a result of the decisions that are made. you can imagine this is like a flatter structure because communication needs to be stronger amongst the employees if they're all going to make decisions together. Communication also occurs in both directions, up the flatter structure, from leaders to staff and back upwards to the leader. They are collaborative and feedback is ongoing and continuous. Service industries, not factories, right? Service industries would be good in this way because when we have service industries, we're concerned with our customers. We want to know what they like, what the feedback they're giving is about certain kinds of sales. You know, if we're selling donuts, which donuts are the most popular donuts? What are people requesting? What are the trends? And we need feedback. We need to understand our customers. So a democratic system works very well for a service industry. Another theorist of leadership named Elton Mayo, he developed a theory called human relations and was a proponent of the idea that employees have a psychological need to believe that their employer cares about what they think. He argued that employees should be asked about their feelings about the workplace, that managers should not only act like supervisors, and that employees should also be consulted about changes in the workplace. We'll talk about change management next year. That's included. Is this belonging? Is it in Maslow? Is it something you expect? I would say it's not Hertzberg. I wouldn't really expect when I go into an organization. I mean, I'd hope that there'd be consultation. I guess you know that going in. I work for 2 companies right now. One, I can communicate whatever I want and get feedback, and the other one is like a black box. I just get instructions like top down and I just do what I'm supposed to do, and then nobody really tells me anything else, and that's all I do. Both of them, if I did, you know, of course I'd rather get feedback. I'd rather feel part of it than the other way. Job satisfaction depends a lot more on pay. What is this talking about? No, who's saying this? Elton Mayo, and that employers should be consulted. Job satisfaction depends on a lot more than just salary. Again, modern thinking. And informal relationships between employees and belonging to a group are very important. Very belonging oriented. Okay, and then the last one is kind of interesting, is something you wouldn't really think about, but there are, so we have the autocratic, top-down, compromising. Decisions are top-down, but we take feedback. Democratic, decisions are made in a group. And then we have this one, laissez-faire, where the decisions are made by the actual staff, more than they're made by the management. Laissez-faire is when the management just lets the employee do the job and get on with it. Why would they do that? Why would you not really supervise or manage the employee? Main reason, training, expertise. If I'm managing a hospital, I can't really know everything that all the doctors and specialists do. My job is to get patients into the hospital and then make sure that I get the right specialists to take care of them and then let the specialists do their job. If I'm the manager of a gaming design company, then my job is to get the best tech people involved that I can do and let them do their job and give them the ideas and the vision for the game and then let them make it. I can't look over their shoulder and say, wait, is that the code that you need to do in order to make a dragon make fire? Is that, I don't know. I don't know how to do that. Does the academic director of a school, can they teach every class in a school? No, they've got to manage the teachers in a way that they find qualified people and then let them do their job. So that's called laissez-faire. When you have skilled workers and you don't really manage their day-to-day work, you let them do their job. So when they say accommodating or laissez-faire, they say this type of leader avoids making decisions. They don't avoid it, they just don't have the knowledge to do it. They don't have the expertise. And leaves us up to other people in the business. There's actually very little communication involved in this leadership style. And employees are left to manage their own goals. Yeah, okay, my goal, I know what my goal is from the vision of the organization. But I don't have to feedback as long as everything is working and I have the resources. Maybe I have to go to management to get better or more resources that I need in order to complete what I'm working on. So it's not just the style and just let them work, it's understanding your employees and understanding how they work and the skills that they have and letting them do it. So for now, I think I'm just gonna let that go, and then I'm gonna finish leadership at the beginning of next week and then introduce the business plan idea as well. That'll be week number 4. So we're not gonna get back until August. I don't think there's any way that we can really imagine that we're gonna be able to make it back by that time. So unfortunately, I think I'll leave it at that for today, and maybe I'll have a preview before this class next Friday. All right, so have a great weekend. Bye, guys.